Well, thank you very much. Good evening, Tunis. Good evening, Carthage. So, I'm here today to give you some tools and knowledge which I think will be very useful for you in changing the world for the better on a range of issues. Now, if we were to look at the defining issue of our era, climate change, and I asked you in the audience what the most effective ways to address climate change were, I'm sure that electric cars or solar power would be on the top of your list. But what if I told you there was a solution right in front of you on your plate in the food you eat? So today, did you know that 29% of global greenhouse gas emissions comes from the global food system? Of this, half of it comes from animal agriculture. Now, that is more than the entire transport sector combined. All of the cars, trucks, buses, planes, and ships in the world combined. Sounds like a pretty big problem, right? Well, how big is this problem? Well, in 2016, the three biggest meat companies in the world, JBS, Cargill, and Tyson Foods, had a greenhouse gas emissions footprint equal to the entire country of France. That puts them right up there with climate villains like big oil, like BP, Shell, and ExxonMobil. If we were to expand this a little bit and look at the 20 biggest meat and dairy companies in the world, they did as much damage as Europe's biggest polluter, Germany. Now, it's not just our climate that's at risk, our oceans are as well. This picture you see behind me is one of the largest dead zones in the ocean. It's off the coast of Texas in the US, and it's been caused by runoff from cattle and pig farms in the southern states of the US. In addition, our rainforests. 91% of Amazon rainforest destruction since 1970 has been linked to forest clearing to create land for beef production. And this isn't a problem that just is confined to developing countries like Brazil. In Australia, where I grew up in Eastern Australia, we're going to lose 3 million hectares of untouched forest over the next 12 years simply to make more land for cattle farming and beef production. Now, what gives us reason to be optimistic is that the solution is in front of us. If we as individuals switch to a plant-based diet, we could reduce our personal individual climate footprint by 40%. And if you scale this from the individual level to the systemic level, to the national and international level, this means that even one of the most heavily industrialized countries in the US, if everyone there made one simple change to their diets, if they switched from eating beef to the same amount of proteins, the same amount of calories from beans, that single change would be enough, according to researchers, to help the country reach up to 74% of its Paris climate target agreements for 2020. Now, that's a lot of impact. Now, this is also backed up by the UN. The UN Climate Change Secretariat says eating vegetarian food as often as you can is one of the most effective ways of reaching our Paris goals. Now, how does this relate to Tunisia? Well, did you know that the earliest references to vegetarian people in European literature refer to Tunisia? I'm talking about ancient Greece. In Homer's Odyssey, Odysseus' ship gets caught in a storm and ends up in the north of Africa. Who does he meet there? He meets a tribe of people who don't eat any meat. Instead, they eat plants, specifically the fruit of one particular plant called the lotus. He called these people the lotophagi, which means the lotus eaters. And according to Herodotus, Strabo, and Polybius, the Lotophagi's homeland was the island of Djerba in modern Tunisia. And it's not just food, almond milk. In the last 3 to 4 years, almond milk has seen an explosion commercially. And people think it's this new, high-tech, hipster alternative to milk. Far from it. It has a very long and rich history here in the Mediterranean. Almond milk has been known since times of ancient Greece and Phoenicia. and was a very core ingredient in the medieval Arab world. In countries with hot climates where you couldn't keep cows, and without refrigeration, you couldn't keep milk for very long without it going bad, this became a core ingredient. To the extent that in the 10th century and 13th century, 14th century, you had cookbooks from Andalusia to Baghdad, which talked about almond milk and how to cook with it. In fact, classical Arabic even had a word, istalaba, which meant making plant milk. In English today, I can't go and say, I'm going to go milk some almonds, but 700 years ago, you could say that in all of the Arab world. Now, what about today? In Tunisia today, vegetarianism or veganism, these are seen as alien, exotic concepts. But forget the label. Vegetarians simply eat the same food that people have eaten for a long time. Staples of our diets, vegetables, fruits, nuts, bread, couscous, that's all vegetarian. And here in Tunisia, you have one of the most sustainable dietary patterns I've seen, that the average Tunisian eats 2 kilos of meat per month. Now that means if I were to pick up any of you from the audience and drop you in Germany or the US or in Australia, the locals there would probably not even call you a carnivore. They would call you a flexitarian or a reducitarian or maybe even a vegetarian. So the label doesn't matter. What matters is choosing healthy food. Now, in the West today, the average consumption of meat is 5 times as much as it is in Tunisia and some countries. Now, why is that? Well, some people will tell you that this is just an inherent part of Western culture, that since Neanderthal times, it's been normal for people to eat meat at breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and to drink milk well into adulthood. But that's not entirely accurate. In fact, this is a very recent phenomenon. It happened in the last 50 to 60 years, and it's been driven by government subsidies. Governments in Western Europe and North America and Australia and New Zealand have financed the overproduction of meat and milk, which led to the growth of multinational corporations making profits off this subsidized input, and then who built lobbies to protect these subsidies and by extension their profits, as well as marketing departments that pushed new myths to build a new culture. Myths such as eating high amounts of animal products is natural, normal, and necessary. This has led to a 700% increase in the number of animals killed over the last 50 to 55 years. And this is in opposition to what most countries and most cultures have, that food from agriculture has always been accessible, it's always been available, it's always been adaptable. We've built entire civilizations based on agriculture along rivers. So Greece, which I mentioned as the home of almond milk, today has the 5th highest dairy consumption in the world, over 300 liters per person per year. That is almost as high as Switzerland. And we all associate Switzerland with cows, but do you associate Greece or the south of Italy or Tunisia with cows and drinking that much milk? No. It shows that culture is flexible, it's not static, it's dynamic. It changes over time as a reflection of socioeconomic contexts around it. Now, these Western lobbies are now looking for new markets, and they've settled on the Middle East and North Africa as a place where they can make a lot of profits. Now, you have the pushing of what's called live exports, wherein an animal at the end of its life, let's say in Ireland, there's a cow, she's not giving as much milk as before, she's not making enough money anymore. They put her on a ship with 1,000 other cows, send her to be slaughtered in North Africa. Now, this is very bad for the cow, obviously. It's also bad for the ship workers, it's bad for consumers here, but most of all, it's bad for local farmers and pastoralists. They can't compete with this sort of subsidized, industrially farmed meat. Now, we've all heard experts from the West come and say that, oh, if only you acted more like us, one day you could be rich like us too. That's a lie. If they want you to aspire to a Western level of consumption, it's not because they're your friend, it's not because it's in your benefit, it's because they can make money off you, because they make the same products anyway. The good news is there's a lot of tools in our hands. We, for better or worse, live in a system where we are consumers first and citizens second. Elections come once every few years. In some countries, they don't come at all. And when they do, people don't participate. That's okay, because we vote with our wallets, with our pockets, with our money, every time we leave the house, every time we eat, every time we drink, every time we shop. And this gives us power. Every meal is a way to send a message. If you want to cut your climate footprint, the best way is to eat a plant-based diet. If you want to stop the lobbies, the best way is to not give them any of your money. Now, Tunisia can lead the way on this. You have a rich history of plant-based food, delicious, healthy, good for the planet, and it can be celebrated. You can resist these lobbies and be proud of your culinary heritage. And we're surrounded by this amazing food every day. Try to choose it. It makes a big difference for everyone. Thank you.